a vampire. Eventually, people began to believe this. Local people went hunting around the cemetery looking for the vampire, armed with crucifixes and heavy wooden stakes. Sean claimed a sleepwalking girl had actually led him to the graves one night to kill the monster. He and David became convinced that a group of Satanists were using the cemetery to summon demons and that the vampire was just one of many. Although the media frenzy has died down now over the years, many locals still swear there's something not right about that cemetery, and so the legend of the vampire lives on. Coming at number 7 now, we have the Screams of the Dead. In 1943, Bethnal Green in East London experienced one of the worst tragedies of World War II. It wasn't from bombs, but panic. During air raid siren tests, civilians on their way to shelter in the tube station began to converge on the same entrance all at once. In their panic to get down, some people tripped, and then a stampede began. People fell to the ground and were crushed. 173 people were trampled to death, including at least 41 children. Locals say the place never really healed. They report hearing women screaming and children crying in the station, and a deep sense of dread in the night air. Moving on to number 6 now, we have a weird one. It's called the Frightening. This was a name given to a creature that's said to live on the Isle of Shetland in Scotland. Locals claim that it's a boneless, blob-like beast that will scare anyone who sees it to death. Those that caught a glimpse and lived to tell the tale described it as looking like a bag of wet sand or wool. Others said it was an armless, legless, ghastly, wet, vile thing that pressed its lidless eye against their windows. A little bit worried because that description kind of fits me. I'm having a rough morning. Number 5 now, we have Netta Fornario. This woman from London was said to be a member of the occult. In the summer of 1929, at the age of 30, she left London for Iona, a small Scottish island steeped in folklore. She joined a secretive occult group known for their ritual magic, tarot cards, mysticism, telepathy, and a deep interest in fairies. After some months, her landlady found her one morning in a frenzy, packing her luggage. She told the landlady that she needed to return to London immediately, as several members of the cult were attacking her telepathically. The landlady said she would have to wait, as the boat didn't run on Sundays. Netta became enraged and retreated to her room. She eventually calmed down and said she would stay and that she was going out for a walk. When she didn't return by nightfall, the landlady raised the alarm. After 2 days, a search party found her body. She was found lying on top of some turf that had a cross carved into it. She was wearing only a thin black cloak. The doctor who examined her body could not find any cause of death. Her body was in a fine physical condition. It was just dead. Officials put it down to exposure to the elements on the cold Scottish island. Others believe she was killed by a psychic telepathic attack generated by someone miles away. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Boggarts. If you're a Harry Potter fan...
Alright, it feels so good to stand again. A lot of you guys hated me sitting, so here we are. How's it going, YouTube? I'm your host for today, Landon Do Not Sing, and welcome back to another scary urban legends video. Before we get totally creeped out, I want to remind you guys to stay tuned to the end of this video because I'm going to be replying to a lot of you guys' comments or questions from previous videos. Also, if you like these series, if you like the scary theme, the urban legends videos that we're producing on this channel, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Jack the Ripper was a serial killer who terrorized the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. He brutally murdered and mutilated at least 5 prostitutes, and his identity was never discovered. He had a very particular way of murdering his victims, and he was never caught. So, of course, there are a ton of conspiracy theories surrounding Jack the Ripper and his murderous rampage through London. So here are the top 10 scary Jack the Ripper urban legends. Starting us off, at number 10, we have Mary Ann Nichols. She was one of the Whitechapel murder victims who was viciously murdered by the infamous Jack the Ripper. Her throat was slashed twice from left to right, and her abdomen was mutilated with one deep, jagged wound. She also had many incisions across her abdomen and a ton of other deep stab wounds as well. Since her brutal murder, it has been said that her spirit has been haunting the Whitechapel area, and people have been hearing strange, ghostly noises of Jack killing Mary Ann Nichols. People have said that they can hear her spirit glowing at the site of her murder, and horses and dogs will refuse to actually go near that location. Now, that would freak me out. Lewis Carroll was actually the murderer, and this slices into number 9. This is the author of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which to me sounds like a very unlikely suspect. However, there are a bunch of urban legends that point to him. Apparently, people believe that he killed a bunch of women and left clues about the murders in his children's stories. Can you imagine if this was real? There are a bunch of ripperologists who have studied his writing, and they were able to unscramble a bunch of passages from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and a bunch of his works that will make you wonder, did he kill all of these women? And did he secretly admit it in his books? The last 4 murders were just cover-ups, and this brings us into number 8. Mary Jane Kelly was believed to be the final victim of Jack the Ripper, but according to an urban legend, the first 4 murders were just an elaborate attempt to cover up the real reason why Mary Jane Kelly was murdered. It is believed that her husband was the infamous serial killer, and his motives for killing his wife was because he was so angry that his wife turned to prostitution, and this was shortly after they got married. So he killed her and 4 other prostitutes as well to make it look like a pattern, and then he killed his wife so the police wouldn't suspect him of committing the crime. So what we learned is to get away with 1 murder, he just killed 5 others. Okay, next up, number 7. The murders were part of a black magic ritual. According to an urban legend, it is believed that Jack the Ripper was a part of a cult to indulge in a very violent form of satanic worship. Apparently, his true motives was to kill 4 prostitutes in order to become the cult leader. In this black magic ritual, certain organs had to be removed from the murdered prostitutes, and they had to be killed at pre-arranged sites that resemble a satanic symbol. The organs that were commonly removed were the heart, kidneys, genitalia, and the womb, which of course were also commonly removed during black magic rituals during this time period. The American Jack the Ripper cuts its way into number 6. There are a lot of speculations that Americans were also the victims of Jack the Ripper. So 3 years before the first Jack the Ripper murder happened in England, a serial killer dubbed the Servant Girl Annihilator brutally murdered 8 people in Austin, Texas, similar to Jack the Ripper. The Servant Girl Annihilator has never been identified, and there are so many theories about his identity. All of the women were killed indoors while asleep in their beds, and some of them were dragged outside and mutilated in the same way as Jack the Ripper victims were. Because of all this evidence, there is an urban legend that suggests that Jack the Ripper was actually the Servant Girl Annihilator, and he roamed the streets of Texas, brutally murdering 8 people before heading off to England to do the same. Elizabeth Stride makes an appearance in at number 5. She's another victim of Jack the Ripper, but she wasn't as brutally murdered as the other ones. The only body mutilation that she had was a slashed throat, so it is believed that Jack the Ripper was most likely interrupted during his murder, and he was unable to chop up her body like his other victims. The local urban legends surrounding her murder say that if you go to Dutfield's yard on Burner Street, you can supposedly hear ghostly and eerie screams of a woman struggling and crying for help. Okay, it's time to travel to Mitra Square in at number 4. This cobblestone area is the site where one of London's most infamous crimes occurred. Catherine Eddowes was discovered at this location at 1:45 a.m. on September 30th, 1888. Catherine Eddowes was Jack the Ripper's 4th victim. She was found laying on her back in a pool of blood with her clothes over her waist. Her throat was slashed, her intestines were taken out, and they were placed over her right shoulder, and she had a lot of other brutal cuts all over her body. Well, the local legend states that on the anniversary of her death, people have reported seeing her ghost figure lying where the corpse was discovered. In at number 3, we're going to be talking about the second victim, Annie Chapman. She was viciously murdered by Jack the Ripper on September 8th, 1888. Her throat had been slashed, she was disemboweled with her intestines thrown out of her abdomen, and part of her uterus was missing. So basically, she was chopped up, and her body was severely sliced and hacked. Her disfigured body was found in...
Welcome back, everyone, to another Urban Legends video. Today we have a country that is very dear to my heart, Ireland. Its history goes back thousands of years. It contains many amazing stories. Some of them are pretty scary, though. They've survived since ancient times. Does this mean there is some truth to them? Let's see what you think. My name is Danny Burke, and this is the top 10 scary Irish urban legends. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Demon Bridge of County Monaghan. This is a story of death. The Demon Bride is said to have terrorized funeral goers for at least 200 years. Her victims now lie in the churchyards where they fell. Across County Monaghan, people report the same thing. The Demon Bride watches funerals, and waits as the deceased are laid to rest. As everyone leaves, the demon bride approaches a young man straggling behind. She transforms into a beautiful young woman and makes him promise to meet her a month from that day back there at the graveyard. She seals the deal with a kiss and then vanishes. As he leaves the graveyard, his blood runs cold and a deep sense of despair washes over him. He realizes he has sold his body and soul to the evil spirit and his life has been forfeited. Over the next month, he descends into madness before eventually dying. He is laid to rest in the same graveyard as before, exactly a month after he first met the demon bride, his promise fulfilled. Next up, number 9 now, we have the Banshee. The Banshee is a female spirit that wails in the night as a sign that death is coming for a family member. Legend says the Banshee has long, streaming hair, wears a grey cloak over a green dress, and her eyes are red from constant weeping. According to the Ancient Legends of Ireland book, the Banshee may be seen at night as a shrouded woman crouched beneath the trees, lamenting with veiled face or flying past the moonlight crying bitterly, and the cry of this spirit is mournful beyond all other sounds on earth and betokens certain death of some member of the family whenever it is heard in the silence of the night. Could not think of a more scary description myself if I tried. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Dergdu. Many countries have a vampire legend. This is the Irish one. The name translates from Irish as red bloodsucker. Originally, the Dergdu was a normal girl who lived over 2,000 years ago. She was said to be beautiful, with blood-red lips and pale blonde hair. Her true name has been lost in the sands of time, overshadowed by what she became. Men travelled from all over Ireland in the hopes of just being with her. However, she fell in love with a local man who was very poor. He was perfect for her, but without money, her father would never let them marry. Instead, he married her off to an old, cruel man who abused her. He liked to draw blood from her while she was locked up in a tower cell. One day, she gave up hope of her true love ever rescuing her and committed suicide by refusing to eat. Her dying breath was a vengeance against the living. Her undead corpse rose from the earth on the night she was buried, thirsting for the blood that was taken from her. She was now the Dergdu, stealing blood from children, from the innocent, and especially from young men. She would call to them in the night with a haunting siren song that lured them to their deaths. Some say she still wanders the Irish countryside at night, calling out to her next victim. At number 7 now, we have the Changelings. These are mythical fairy creatures that take the place of a newborn human child that has been stolen by the fairies. The fairies will steal the child to act as a servant for them. Families would try and see if their baby was actually a changeling through a number of different ways. One of them involved placing them over a fire. If the baby was a changeling, it would leave by just climbing up the chimney. The real child would then be returned. It was thought that the fairies preferred to steal baby boys. As a result, many Irish families would dress their baby boys in dresses to confuse the fairies. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Dullahan. The Dullahan is a headless rider of the night who carries his own head under one arm. His mouth is locked in a hideous grin that touches both sides of his head. His